I bought a practice nobody else wanted. It literally had possums in the walls. The key thing I did was go off the tools as a dentist. When I sold, it was walk in, walk out. I got cash up front with no retention period. If you want to scale and have a genuinely valuable business, you've got to get out of your own way. So it used to be word of mouth. Now it's word of thumb. And I was in the morning vomiting my guts up, to be honest. Someone described business ownership as being, it's like antivirus software. Like, it never switches off.
Hey there, and welcome back to NexChapter, recorded right here in the Republic studio, as you can see behind my head. Think about it as the Republic for founders and entrepreneurs, where we share wisdom, celebrate the journey of another entrepreneur, and have some fun. I am Raman Sehgal, and I am the host of NexChapter. I am also the author of The Flounder and Founder, which you can see very subtly positioned behind my back here. And I am also the co-lead for the Toronto chapter for post-exit founders. And this show is for founders who are scaling their business and for those who have sold and are figuring out what to do next. And every episode that we do here on NexChapter focuses on the 3 T's, the trajectory of the business, the transaction the entrepreneur went through, and the transition, the reality after the exit. Think about it as unfiltered wisdom from post-exit founders. And my guest today is a fantastic one from down under in Australia. Amazing that he called so early his time to make it work at my time on Eastern time. But that's the type of guy that Dr. Michael Filosi is. And a bit of background about my guest: he is a dentist and the principal clinician at Fullerton Park Dental in Adelaide, where he has helped grow the practice into a modern multi-surgery facility serving families and individuals across the eastern suburbs until, of course, he sold the business. And that's what the bulk of today's show is about. It's an incredible story, actually, of the type of business that, if you look at it, you think, how are you going to scale a dental practice? And that's exactly what he did, and created one of the most sought after facilities in the whole of Australia. And that is a very big country, I have to say. Dr. Filosi earned his bachelor's of dental surgery from the University of Adelaide in 2006, and has worked both interstate and in South Australia before joining and expanding his Fullerton practice. Known for combining clinical expertise with patient-first approach, Dr. Filosi is active in the local community and mentors aspirational dental professionals while continuing to enhance patient care and experience where he still adds value in his kind of dental practice. And that's an interesting place to talk about as well, where it's the story of someone that's got a technical profession, a very amazing profession to be a doctor and a dentist to help people out, but now kind of in the phase post-sale, trying to figure out what he's doing next is super interesting. So look out for that today. As always, thanks so much for listening or watching to the show. Hope you're enjoying it. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, maybe leave us a kind comment. And above all, please enjoy today's show. Dr. Michael, welcome to the show. Welcome to NexChapter.
Thank you very much. Really looking forward to this.
Well, you were my first guest from down under, a place I've got, very, very fond memories of living there when I was younger. So thank you for making the time very early your time, right?
It is. It was funny with the appointment slots that to book in. It was sort of midnight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 a.m. So I've gone the 6 a.m. shift. So if I look a bit bleary-eyed, that's why.
We should have done the midnight slot. I could have grabbed a whiskey or a beer from the bar here. So
it would have been a different drink to what I've chosen, but it's good times.
Well, tell us what drink you brought. I'm guessing it's going to be a coffee. Is my guess at 6 o'clock in the morning.
And look, I mean, what's the saying? It's time to drink somewhere in the world. But at 6 a.m. now, I've gone the coffee. So I think it was a fairly obvious choice. And I think for me, I've always had a lot of energy, and it's funny because I only started drinking coffee a couple of years ago because I kind of never needed it, never wanted it. But my wife is a vegetarian, or she was, and I never drank coffee. And we're kind of having this trade-off to see who'd break first. Would she eat meat first? Would I go with coffee first? And we both kind of flexed a bit. So now, yeah, I quite enjoy coffee. And so I've got a nice coffee here sitting with me.
Good for you. It is the greatest. It is the greatest drink in the world. I'm telling you, there's no going back.
Yep.
Well, I brought in. I drink these quite a lot. These Hip Hop, which is like very cool brand from the UK.
Yeah, unreal.
Berries and cherries. It's good for my gut, apparently, which is fantastic. So I'll open this in a second. I want to ask you a question. Well, look, you built a very successful business and managed to exit, and that's kind of the story we want to try and bring to life for our viewers and listeners today. So just to start off with, maybe give us a bit of the kind of quick version of what it was you built and as a business, because it was very purposefully called you Dr. Michael at the start, and so love you to kind of just give us a bit of the overview of what happened, and then we'll rewind back into the trajectory piece.
Happy days. So I'm a dentist by training, and I was an employee dentist for 10 years, and I wasn't sure whether to have my own practice or not. Eventually I did, but I bought a practice nobody else wanted. It literally had possums in the walls. It had, no website. It had, it was very broken down, but I loved it. Okay. It had 2 dental chairs, so it was on the smaller side of things. 10 years later, I sold it. It had 10 dental chairs. We employed, 30 odd team members, and it was sort of the biggest and, dare I say, best in Adelaide. So that 10 years, I always sort of say, in every industry, there's someone who's had the worst in that city of that, and there's someone who's got the best, but not often is it the same person. Whereas I can honestly say I've had the worst dental practice in my city, and I've had the best one as well. And they were the same one.
What makes a bad one? What makes a bad dental practice? Was it the business side of things, or did it have a bad reputation?
Yeah. It's a really good question. Look, I say bad, but it's if you can't see the potential in it, it looked bad. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I could see so much potential in it. But basically, it needed a lot of TLC. So the bones of it were good. The patient care was good. There was actually a lot to, I sort of say that in jest. There was a lot that I loved about it. I bought the jolly thing, so I saw enormous potential. But I think if you weren't paying attention, or you couldn't see what it could become, it looked poor. So to others' eyes, it looked poor. To me, it was like the best looking thing I'd ever seen. I saw it once and I was like, this is it. I'm set. Dug my teeth into it to sort of, to use a dental analogy. But it was just very run down. So that was the thing. So it had a really good reputation, actually. The dentist I joined with was an excellent dentist and a lovely man. So reputation was great. Potential was great. But just the eye factor of looking around and going, it looks pretty run down. That's, I suppose, why I say it was the worst in Adelaide. But in seriousness, no, it clearly wasn't. But if you weren't sure what you were looking for, it would be easy to be. And a lot of people did pass it off as being that's got no potential.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit when people buy, doer upper properties, right, that have got potential, or, and actually like in business, you get a franchise or something that's not running particularly well, and opportunity lies in able to a car, like an old car that can be done up in kind of a sort of similar type of mentality, but the bones of it were good, the reputation of it was good. And then what happens from this point? So this was your first practice, and then did you expand your practices? And we are going to come back to it. So I don't want to rush your story, just to be clear.
So basically, I bought the building, like the property the practice was on, and the business. So they were 2 separate transactions, and that was really important to me because as soon as I got my legs under the desk, I had a vision for what I wanted to do. So absolutely, as soon as I had them both, I was there tearing out trees and trying to do my best to kind of expand the place or get it ready for a future build. So long story short, we did one build, and that was terrific. And I thought, happy days, I'm done. This will do me for 30 years. And basically, as soon as we finished, I was like, this isn't big enough. So then we bought next door, little old lady named Joan, who was 100, who passed away. I bought her property. We turned that into a car park. And then the existing property we were on, we built to the very back fence. So 2 significant renovations throughout. Which allowed it. So for a dental practice, unlike a lot of businesses, the physical size is super important. You need that physical footprint to be able to operate, to grow. So for me, maximizing that as quickly as I could meant that I could then scale the business.
We've got viewers and listeners, I'll be all over the world, and obviously different healthcare systems work differently. So in Oz, or in Adelaide specifically, does who pays for the dental treatment? Is it like
Yeah.
partially covered by the government and then there's a private on top, is my guess? Is pretty
No, it's a good question, and I appreciate you catching me up on that. So basically, I'm a private dental practice, or I own a private dental practice, so it would all be funded by the patient. So occasionally some would have health insurance, so they'd have an arrangement with a health insurer where they'd cover part of it, but ultimately the patient's responsible for the cost. And then if they've got health insurance, that'll pay for a bit of it. The government didn't really cover any of it there. So it was a private dental practice from private paying patients.
Okay, so it sounds very similar to what we have here in Canada, or what is quite typical in the US. If you've got insurance, fantastic, and it might
Totally
supplement. Interesting enough, I booked my dental appointment this morning, and I say it's a few $100s to get it done. The insurance will pay for most of it, and then I might pay the difference. Is okay, fantastic. So then, did you just have the one practice, or then did you end up expanding into multiple practices and have a chain of these by the end?
So my view was, there's a good show, Suits, which I think was shot in Canada actually as well, right?
Good story about that. When I moved here, my the office that we moved in for remarketing, when we set up the office in Toronto, I went for lunch and I'm standing outside this building opposite our office, and is it deja vu? Is it like, what is this? Like, I feel like I've been here before. And then, and it turns out it was where, the guys all stand outside and have their big conversations. It was the Suits buildings. There's 2 or 3 identical buildings. There you go. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's cool. That must have been unreal. My wife and I sort of fell in love with that show, a fair while ago now. And it's suave and it's a sexy show. It's fun to watch. But like, I think, Harvey, someone was bragging to him about saying, oh, we've got, 30 different law firms in 20 different cities. And he says to them back, he said, one firm, the city, being New York for them, So, and I kind of like that idea too. Now, look, Adelaide is not New York, but my view is I didn't want to have multiple cruddy practices there. A lot of them, it's a bit of a bragging metric to say how many practices you've got, but they're not often very good with having multiple practices in healthcare. So my thing was, I didn't want to have, I wanted one practice and I wanted it to be the very, very best in my city. And that's what I did. So having multiple practices didn't interest me in the slightest. I've seen lots of people do it. I've seen lots of people do it poorly, to be really frank. Yeah. Whereas I just wanted one practice and have it be the very, very best in Adelaide, in my city. So I had, one site, and I never seriously had a view. It didn't excite me. The idea of having multiple sites didn't excite me at all. So I just wanted, the one.
That's so interesting, because there's a lot of truth in what you said there. I mean, what I've seen in my experience is certainly medical businesses, when they expand in multiple sites, you do potentially see a drop off in either quality or the consist. I mean, I think it probably goes to most businesses, once you expand multiple sites, it's actually, that's where your process and all that becomes very important. But certainly I can see the value in it not being something for you, because it would strike me as being an absolute pain in the backside to have to manage multiple practices, especially when you're dealing with people's health as well.
All those things are true. I think as well, you end up dispersing your best people. So instead of having everyone on site, if you send out one person to manage one to manage another, instead of having a core group of really high performers, you end up, basically splitting up the best team members. So it just didn't interest me. The thing that resonates a lot with me is this idea of hard, interesting, meaningful problems. So everything in my life, it's about those 3. Finding hard things to do is pretty easy. Finding meaningful things to do is not. But interesting, finding things that sort of light a fire in your belly is the thing that is trickier. So putting a baby to sleep, it's hard, it's meaningful, but it's not interesting. You don't fanboy about the experience and sit there going, oh, this is just fascinating doing this. And for me, having a practice at scale be the best in the city and having a big practice with a small practice feel, for me, that was a really interesting problem. Like, how do I solve this problem? Having multiple sites, it just was never an interesting problem to me. It was never something, do I think I could have done it? Yeah, I'm sure I could have. We had the systems and processes and things set up, but it wasn't a problem that ever excited me. I never seriously made even the tiniest little, move towards it. It just didn't interest me.
Yeah, I love it because it's actually, I said counterintuitive. It's not counterintuitive. It's more like the obvious thing for people to do would be to multiply their practices. But as you took a very intentional path to say, actually, I'm going to have one practice. I'm going to expand this and I'm going to make it absolutely awesome. And it's kind of like, if I build it, they will come, I'm guessing. So what, in in the lifetime of being an entrepreneur, you make millions of decisions on a daily basis. So when you reflect back, like, what made this business so good, right? Was it, well, actually, what were the decisions, right? Was it this decision? Was your decision to say no to expanding, was that probably one of the key decisions you made to almost not distract yourself?
Look, I've been thinking about this in advance. I don't think that specifically was one of the key things, but I think there definitely were key things. I think buying a practice that had potential for expansion, for starters. So the physical footprint is important in dentistry. If you're confined physically, you can't move anymore, you're stuck, right? You just need the operatories, the rooms to do business in. So for me, I think I'm not sure how quickly you want me to run through them, but the key things
we're good.
Cool. So one of the key things, right? So if you said, what's the key thing? The key thing I did was go off the tools as a dentist, right? That was really pivotal for me. So I bought the business into it with a view to working as a dentist for life. Like, that was my vision, right? And then as we grew, I realized there was this thing called business, which fascinated me. And it wasn't a matter of working, some people leave dentistry. A lot of clinical dentists don't like dentistry, right? And it's a matter of, are you moving towards the light? Are you moving away from the darkness? So for me, I was moving towards the light of this thing called business ownership. It wasn't that I hated dentistry, but there was this really cool, fun game called business. So gradually, one of the key things I did was to get off the tools for all sorts of reasons. Firstly, it allowed me to then focus, work on the business, not in it, for starters.
Yeah.
And secondly, ultimately, removing that key person dependence. When it came time to sell, when I sold, it was walk in, walk out. I got cash up front with no retention period. It meant that I could position the business as something that could run genuinely without me, as opposed to most dentists who own a practice, they're then tied to it for 3 years, 5 years. Because I wasn't seeing patients, I could be done with it.
And Michael, did you do it for that reason, right? Were you intentionally, and again, I love the phrase "go off the tools." So I've got in my mind, I've got you, looking after a patient with all your tools, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to put them down, pass this to someone else. I'm going to go run the business, which I think is very cool, by the way. But were you thinking of that because actually you wanted to just take a step back and take it? You don't strike me as a take it easy type of guy, or was it very intentional? Was it like, actually, if I get this thing purring, being very profitable, making good money, and not be the guy running every day, I'm building an asset to sell here?
A little bit of both, but I think primarily, right, like I realized there was a hard ceiling on how good a dentist I could be. So I was serviceable. I was better than serviceable, but I realized I was never going to be the best clinical dentist in Adelaide. In terms of my hand skills were just not there, that I could do some of the exceptional work that I could see others doing. And I remember thinking, okay, if I can't be the best dentist in Adelaide, maybe I can have the best dental practice. And it occurred to me then, I kind of flipped from having the mindset of a technician of going, I'm going to do work and take photos and have it, the before and afters be the best, versus going, I reckon I can run the best dental practice. And I was really confident I could too. Yep. I knew my wife is a dentist too, and her dad's an artist. She's got amazing hands. I can't see the shapes and colors and things like some people can. To me, everything's kind of formulaic, right? But with the business, that kind of helped a fair bit, to be honest. So I realized I could probably have a crack at having the best dental practice in Adelaide, but I didn't think I could see I wasn't going to be the best dentist, and I wanted to go harder, basically.
Yeah, so interesting. And actually, it takes a lot to recognize that as well. Like, good on you. A lot of founders, entrepreneurs think they're the best at absolutely everything, and I think typically medical businesses are often, I think the doctors my kids go to, it's all around the doc, like the doc. Yeah. I'm not going to say his name, but 100%. It's all about that person. Now, I always think that must be really hard for him if he wants to get out of this business, because actually everyone wants to see him, right? And actually that will, and maybe that's his goal. So you never know if he might want to be the best, pediatrician in Toronto or whatever. But you were very kind of intentional about that. And was in terms of the business growth itself, obviously you created this footprint, you were stepping back with yourself. Did you do anything else in terms of, say, customer traction, getting clients to spend more money? Because I imagine word of mouth is big, but did you do anything else to, and again, there might be listeners to this or viewers thinking, well, actually, my business is a bit like a dental, practice.
Yeah.
It could be a yoga studio, it could be whatever, right? And so any kind of tips or hints that, or any, I suppose, things that you did that really, really, got that traction in, because you obviously built a very successful business because you sold it. We'll come on to that, but anything else? Yeah.
I just want to come back to the previous point first. So absolutely, there's a lot of dentists who want to be the man or the woman, and ego is huge, right? Ego is huge. They want to be seen as the central pillar through everything's got to run through, right? And I think if you want to scale and have a genuinely valuable business, you've got to get out of your own way, right? And I think as well that so often in dentistry, the senior dentists, they bring people in, and quite often if the other ones that are in are better at what they do than what they are, they sabotage them. They find a reason to hate on them because it hits on their ego. They're like, hang on a tick, this young kid, they're better than I am. Oh no, they're not this, they're not that. I was very happy. I said to my team, I hope you're a better dentist than I am. Like, I want you to be that. So yeah. I had a strong enough ego and sense of self that it didn't, when I'd see some of the really high quality work my colleagues did, I didn't feel threatened by that. I didn't feel because they could do that and maybe I couldn't, that, oh, I'm less than. I didn't lose that sense. So you've got to get out of your own way, park the ego. If you want to grow, if you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, take others with you. I wanted to go a long way and play a bigger game. And that meant not sabotaging the others and not having a sense of ego about it being Dr. Filosi, Dr. Filosi, Dr. Filosi. To come to your second point, growing it. I remember on our baby moon with my wife, she was heavily pregnant. I read a book and I had a whole lot of marketers basically, and they all had a chapter. So it's kind of like them all trying to get you to pick them, right? But one of them was on Google reviews, right? And social proof. And this is back in 2017. So Google reviews were a thing, but they weren't massive. And for me, it just hit on me. It was like, this is it. This is where it's got to be, right? So I think that I heard a really cool thing, right, about Beyonce, right? And her dad got them to be, when they were training, they got them to exercise really hard because he could not just see that he could see that performance was going to be, it wasn't just stand and deliver, it was going to be color and motion, but not just that.
Thing, yeah.
100%. He saw around corners, right? He saw the next stage, but not just that. He got them to belt out their songs while they were running on a treadmill, right? So it wasn't just one or the other. It was like, you needed to be able to do that and perform. So I think for me, I was able to see that this thing called Google reviews and social proof was going to be massive, right? So it used to be word of mouth. Now it's word of thumb. You're scrolling through. So we very much made a strong effort to go as hard as we possibly could at getting more of those than anyone else in Adelaide by a long, long way. So we pushed that super duper hard so that then when people were scrolling and trying to find us, that they could find us. We were a really, really high quality dental practice. So the core product was good, but you need that amplification. And the medium to do that I found was through social proof, through reviews. We absolutely still had plenty of people who found out about it through friends and family, but having that online presence and dominating that, like just cutthroat, getting rid of everyone else as much as you can that's in the nearby area was really pivotal.
I love that because, when we, there'll be people watching this and thinking, God, like they thought it was such an old school relationship driven word of mouth practice. But I love the fact that you've very intentionally, you've driven growth in your business by dominating that digital space locally, which I think is so smart because it just proves that it can be done with any business. I remember years ago, I used to get these blogs from this guy in the UK, and he used to always use the example of barber, like hairdressers or barbers, and that they never ever utilized a database. They would just, whoever came in off the street, and he talked about how you could, grow and it's quite common now, obviously 20 years on or whatever, but that's very cool. Like, I love that. So, okay. So just reflect.
Can I just jump in on that? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. So just on that exact point, man, like, I totally agree. And the thing is, you've got mature industries, and dentistry was a mature industry. Like, we couldn't change, teeth are teeth. The tools we had were the same as everyone else. So how do you scale a mature business in a mature industry is very different to something which is super enterprising. So down the end of my street, there's a bakery which has grown and grown and grown and grown and now has franchises. That's it. Like, they're making pastries, right? I met up with him because I was like, how did you do it? Because I can learn something from you, right? Because, okay, bakery, dentistry, but it's both the mature industries, and he could scale, and he did scale, and he grew in a mature industry. So I wanted to learn from him on how he did it, because both of us had worked in mature industries. We weren't able to have a piece of code that separated us. So yeah, absolutely. That was a really key thing is recognizing that. And how do you grow in a mature industry?
I also just love the fact that you've mentioned that you've learned from another entrepreneur from completely different industries. One of the reasons I do this podcast is exactly that is like, there's so much you can learn from other people that have scaled businesses. So, okay, I'm going to try and summarize like so you were very intentional about saying no almost and being very focused on being the best at it as you could. I love that kind of we learned from Suits bit. The digital dominance piece, I think, is fantastic, even in a mature industry. But you also, guys, you were very good at what you did as a practice, and you, over time, recognized that your passion was elsewhere. So you extracted yourself. Okay, that I'm sure there's lots of other things, but I just pulled those three out because I think they're fantastic. And
cool. So
what led to the transaction then in the decision to sell the business? Was there like a moment, like was there a stars aligning moment? Was there a very intentional plan? Just to give us a bit of an insight.
I thought I'd be there for another 15, 20 years. So it came on very quickly, very, very, very quickly. It was really important to me to have a business that was built to sell, that was ready to sell, but I had no thought of doing it until I did. And then all of a sudden, the dominoes fell extremely quickly. There are probably a few key moments there that set stuff off. I think that I am an intense guy. I'm like, just go as hard as you can. And the reward for me has always been enormous, but the cost was also enormous across all aspects of life. And all of a sudden, the reward just dropped off. It fell through the floor in terms of, instead of building things, I was fixing things. And that's not nearly as fun, right? So when you go from building a practice, building a team, building an intranet, building a reputation, building physically, doing 2 big renovations, when you go to just fixing stuff and fixing not very fun problems, it suddenly takes a lot of the joy out of it. I looked at why you do anything, right? So I went through and I was like, why do you do anything? So you do something because there's consequences if you don't, like going through a red light. So you don't, you stick to the road, which there's consequences. You do something as a service to others, like raising kids. You do something because it's good for you, like eating broccoli. You do something because you enjoy it. So I literally went through very granular, the reason why you do anything. And I realized it didn't tick any box anymore. I was like, there is nothing on this list compelling me to keep doing this. So there was definitely that. I spoke to a few people who had exited their business fairly early in life, and that also the fact that I could see the other side and they seemed happy. I think as well, to be very honest, we went through a rough patch in the business, and I think I've always had a strong psychosomatic response to stress, and I was in the morning vomiting my guts up, to be honest. Like, it was a really terrible thing at 3 a.m. for my wife to come in, and we had a few bad apples in that were undermining the whole thing, and you just kind of realize, like, it's got a cost. And I was talking to a mate of mine who also has a business and gets business. And I was telling him this, and he looked at me like I'd told him the most absurd thing ever. And I kind of just stopped him. Oh, like, what would you do? And he said, Michael, he said, if that happened to me, I'd sell tomorrow. And I was like, wow. So I realized then, like, I shouldn't be normalizing this. It's been a fun ride. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's been enormously fulfilling across multiple things, but it just kind of occurred to me. It's like, I think I'm done. Like, I think it's time to sell. Like, I think it's time to see what else is out there. And it was an enormous surprise to just about everyone who knew me, because everyone knew how passionate I was about my business. And for me to do that was a massive switch, but it also felt like absolutely the right thing to do. Like, I feel that in my life, when I make a decision, I'm a slow thinker. I don't make rash decisions, but when I commit to something, it's like, it's as good as done, basically. So when that flicked in my head, it was like, yeah, let's do this.
And what was your wife's view on that, if you don't mind me asking? Was she kind of like, I'm guessing she was like, hey, Mike, like, I'm sick of you being stressed, and, we need to, it's probably not great for you, and you had a young kid at the time and all that kind of stuff.
No, definitely. So she was supportive of it. Her first comment was, when I said to her, I said, I'm thinking about selling. And she said to me straight away, she says, I'm looking forward to having you back.
Oh, wow. Oh, that says it all, man. That says it all.
It does. Yeah. So, it was a really key thing. I think I read an article on LinkedIn about, I was on holidays with, family, and we're in this pool in Cairns, and my daughter and I were playing chasey, and I went to run away, like as part of the chasey game. And she said to me, she was setting the rules, and she goes, "You've got to run as fast as you can. You're not allowed to look back." And just those words in my ear while I was thinking about selling, I was like, that for me was business. Run as fast as you can. You're not allowed to look back, And it was like a 10-year sprint for me, right? It wasn't a marathon. It was a sprint. Everything was like, I could not have gone harder than I did. So when she said those words, fast as you can, you're not allowed to look back, I was like, this sounds familiar. Now, she was talking about the rules for the game we were playing, but I was like, that's me. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about, the decision to sell. And it sits very, very easily. And with me, I didn't prevaricate one way or the other. Do I, don't I? It was like, let's do this. Yeah.
It's interesting. I remember there was a very specific occasion where the stress of running my first business was we were in Cape Cod near Boston and on vacation, and I wasn't on vacation because I was on calls all day. And we had big client projects to deliver. We were starting to look actually at running a process. I was writing my book at the time as well, and it was too much. And I remember saying to my wife, I need to find a way in all for you as well, because you bought the building you mentioned before, which I'm guessing all your wealth assets from a wealth perspective were tied up in this business. So, God forbid a patient sues you the next day. That was the thing I always worried about, that, we were working with bigger and bigger clients, listed companies.
Yeah.
We had 80, 90 staff at this point in time. So one of these guys really makes a mistake and it's all on me. And that was the thing that kept me up, which is you build something where it gets to a point where it almost there's more to lose than there is to gain, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. There's more to lose than there is to gain. That's exactly how it felt. And you're right. If someone or something tries to take a big chunk out of your backside, it's like, this is going to be painful. And yet there's some significant size loans and you own all the properties, and, dental equipment's expensive. Getting it fitted out is expensive when you've got 10 dental chairs all fitted out. So I think that's a really good way of putting it. There was more to lose than there was to gain. I couldn't see where was the upside here, and I could see that. Yeah. And I think someone described business ownership as being, it's like antivirus software. It never switches off. So you can be on holidays, but it's still there, going in that same trip, same thing. I had to let someone go via the phone while I was away. What else did I have to do? I had to, organize a surgical motor for a handpiece. There were all these things that were still, you're away physically, but emails, organizing contracts. And it becomes all consuming, It ends up just occupying so much of your head. There's just no room for anything else, So I think combine all those things. Yeah, I think it's fair to say, it felt like I've got more to lose here than to gain. I think it occupied so much of my head space that, I'd had a good crack at it and I'd done very well. And I was just ready to explore what's on the other side.
And we're not going to go into the details of the transaction. I'm interested in understanding who bought the practice and what that process looked like. Did they knock on you? Did you know, did you have an idea of who the acquirer would be? But also, so that's kind of part one, but also you've already talked about, Michael, you'd obviously stepped back from the business. So it was in my mind, it's a bit of a turnkey, but I'm interested in what else made the business valuable, right? Was it profitable? Did it have good cash flow? It obviously had good, good equipment and good assets, which is obviously very relevant. But I'm just interested in understanding for our audience, what made this thing so valuable that someone wanted to hand over some cash and buy it off you?
So it was very big. It had very good so dentistry is an amazing cash flow business because everyone pays 2 minutes after they get the treatment, right? So
it's so annoying as a customer.
Yeah, you don't get out that door. I was going to gang tackle anyone who tried to not pay. No, I'm just kidding. But you pay on the day, right?
Yeah.
Or something. So no one leaves. There's basically zero outstanding debtors, right? So so what made it? So it was very large, very very profitable, it was done at scale. So we had all the systems in place. It was as close to a turnkey business. So we had an intranet I developed as well on how to run the practice. So literally I had all these IP as well. All of our assets, the staff, the patient base, the physical assets, and the IP were all the best in Adelaide. So that's what made it a very attractive proposition. I feel it had very low key person risk too. So no clinician billed more than 17%. Typically in dentistry, you've got your money maker, someone's earning big money or billing a lot, and then you've got the rest. Whereas ours, there was no one who billed more than 17%.
What did you call it? What did you call that? You said low person risk. Is that if did I hear that? It's almost like in you have client concentration risk in business companies where like you don't want a client that's more than 30% or whatever. It's a similar concept, right?
Totally. So it was like the reverse of that with the clinicians, that no one. So in dentistry, it's lower transaction volume, but we had sort of 10,000 patients or something like that on the books. So none of those is like 1%, no, even 1%. But in terms of the clinicians, it was all a nice even spread among 10, 11, 12 people. So no one person was the key person. If they fall over, if they want to leave or something, that the whole practice falls down. So that was attractive as well.
And are they all employed? Are these clinicians all employed by you? Are they like contracted in, or is it a bit of a mix?
A bit of a mix, yeah. So there's different setups, employment and non-employment natures where you can kind of, they're on various setups, I suppose. So some of them are employed, but not all of them. Some of them were engaged, I guess you could say. So they were on various setups. Yeah.
So we know why. So very profitable, cash flow heavy, low turnkey, all this. Who bought the business then? I think I know this, but I'd love you just to tell the story of. Did you know these people, and did you have a relationship with them in advance?
Look, so what it's worth, I feel like everyone's a bit too. If you're the pretty girl at the bar, like at some point you want to find a dude, presumably, right?
Me, is that what you're calling me?
Well, you're a good-looking man. I don't know. We're going to go there. Is it okay? Like, yeah. So look, maybe I do need some vodka, not coffee here. Hey, just to make the conversation the next way. No, look, I kind of feel like. If you're the pretty girl, the pretty guy, and you want, at some point you've got to kind of give something up. You've got to let people know, hey, like I'm looking too. So I wasn't too, and I feel that people always want to be the one who gets approached. And I was like, stuff that. Like if I want to sell this thing, I'm happy going to market. I don't need someone to approach me. I also want competitive tension. So I sat down and I had my book and I figured out at our size, we were never going to sell to one or two dentists. It was always going to be to what's called like a corporate, right? So a dental aggregator, kind of like PE, I guess, private equity, but they own multiple practices. So I knew who they were. They were really obvious. They all had LinkedIn profiles with the CEO. So I literally wrote them all down. There were 7 in Australia that I could come up with, and I called them and I asked to speak to the CEO. And then I said to them, I've got a 10-share dental practice in Adelaide. Are you interested in buying it? So from there were 7 names. One of them I didn't trust, to be honest, an entity, so I never actually called them. One of them didn't go too far. One of them had been bought out. So it basically came to 4. So I had 4 different entities come through the practice, middle of the day, hidden in plain sight. So staff could see them coming, but didn't know who they were. And I had 3. One of them wasn't in a position to be able to put an offer in. They were still figuring stuff out, but 3 did. And I negotiated from there and sold.
So when you picked up the phone and spoke to the CEOs, which is cool as hell, by the way, that's a very cool play. What was it you were saying like that attracted them? Was it like, hey, was it the size? Was it the profit? Was it like, what was it that really got their attention?
The size. Yeah. So 10 dental chairs is a large practice. So not many, and the corporates don't want, one, like a dentist will buy a practice with 1, 2, 3 chairs, right?
Okay.
But the corporates aren't interested in that. They don't want to have all these pokey little locations. Yeah. So to be able to go
10 chairs, they know, okay, in their mind, they know 1 chair is possibly worth X.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. That's very cool.
So they're basically going, that's 10 operatories to work out of in the one site, right? So 10 chairs, instead of having, 2 here and 3 here and 4, it's like 10 chairs. So that's a very large dental practice, right? And so as soon as you say that, you've got their attention, as opposed to if you're 1, 2, 3 chairs, they're like, oh, yeah, whatever. But when you're talking, they're looking for 4 plus. So 4, 5, 6. But then when you say 10, it's like, well, you've got their ear straight away.
You've got their attention. Yeah. That is really.
You say that, and cool. There's just not that many, right? There's just not that many 10-share practices. So as soon as you say that, there's like a handful, in each city, if you're lucky, right? So 10 shares is like they're suddenly paying a lot of attention.
Well, also if I'm one of these practices and I've got one in Brisbane, I've got one in Sydney, I've got one in Melbourne, I've got one in Perth or whatever, I'm probably thinking, well, actually, we don't have a presence in Adelaide. This could be an opportunity. Like, I could definitely think the geographic play. Was there also a sense of, and you might be able to go into this when you tell us, when you go into who actually ended up purchasing the business, were they also interested in how has he built this business to be this profitable, or this, like, were they also, like, they didn't want to just buy the EBITDA and the profit, like the cash flow. They were actually like, what can we learn from this practice that we can then adopt across our other practices?
Look, it's a really good point. I think I did a video, right? So for any team members coming on board, because basically what happened was they'd see the flashy, lovely practice, but they wouldn't realize where it's come from. Whereas all the patients, they remembered what it looked like when there was possums in the walls and a big crack. So I did a video with a whole lot of photos of me talking about the progression of the practice because I wanted our team to understand where it had come from. But I ended up sending that video to the prospective buyers as well. So they could watch a 40-minute video of me talking over the top of it with all the pictures so they could see the journey of the practice, right? And that worked quite well to whet their appetite. And they could clearly see what I'd done and the fact, like, hey, this is a pretty rare beast here. It's funny, they weren't, look, there's definitely some IP there. Whether they're making as much use of it as they could, maybe not, I'm not entirely sure. But I think as well, to be honest, the fact that I'd created that and they could see that and they'd taken not much and turned it into something, it actually gave me a bit of leverage, I suppose, in terms of ordinarily you stick around afterwards, you've got to earn out of 2 years, 3 years. Whereas I was able to say to them, one, you don't need me because I'm off the tools. But two, I said to them, right, I remember sitting in my office and they'd say, oh, normally we get you to stick around for this long. And I said, look, here's the thing. I said, someone who does this is someone who is I'm always going to think I know more than what you will. So you don't want me here. You want me long gone because I'm going to be a thorn in your side. Like, you've seen where it was and what it is now. And I said it jokingly, but seriously too. I was like, when you buy this, you want fresh air to be able to do things your way. The last thing you want is me, the guy. Yeah. If I think I can do this, then I'm going to always think I know better than what you do. And you don't want that. You want to run and, and I also want it to be gone, but it was true too. Like, I would be a pain in the backside to have stick around in that capacity, right? I'd be a thorn in their side. So them seeing what I'd done and going, this guy's pretty clever. This is pretty cool. This is pretty amazing. Because the practice itself it was a very, very polished practice. It looked really nice and it was in an affluent area as well. So I suppose when they come on site and they can see the building that it's in and they're like, yep, this is like all top of the notch. Like, it was really high quality stuff.
Did they buy the building as well?
No. So I'm the landlord. So, and they were very keen they wanted to know my intentions for the property. And I said to them, look, we've got a shared interest here because they don't want a different landlord. They want the same and I don't want to sell. Like, I want them to be in it forever and they want me to have it forever. So I said to them, look, I didn't want to sell it and they didn't want to buy it. So I didn't want to sell the property with it.
Well, that's the thing. These guys are not property businesses, right? Nope. They are practice. So that's super smart though. And I want to kind of like, I have a friend in the UK that he actually built multiple practices, but the skill in his was he also owned all the buildings. And I think there was 10 of them in the end. He owned 10 practices and 10 buildings. And he built and he kept all the buildings and sold all the practices.
Yeah.
And this was 15 years ago. So the building value has probably gone up exponentially in addition to the rental income. So that's really smart. And so, yeah. And before we go into the kind of transition in, because you mentioned that you were able to almost cash out immediately. Who bought the company that bought the practice? Like, what were the main considerations for you? Was it obviously being able to walk away on day one, but also was it presumably obviously the amount of cash, the structure of the deal, all this type of stuff? And was it life-changing money for you and your family, right? Because obviously you'd already been a successful dentist. It's not like you were kind of on the breadline. You were successful builder, but was it day and night, the before and after, in terms of like your life and your family?
It's a good question. It was a lot of money, but it wasn't day and night, right? Because I think the thing for me is I've always been very much, I'm made bank, right? As an entrepreneur, make bank, take money off the table, and I very much, as soon as we made money, I would buy shares or pay down the property loans. So we'd done well. Like, I've always been obsessed with finance, money and things, right? And if you're obsessed with something, you get very good at it. So I didn't have all my eggs in this one basket of, nothing joy.
Yeah.
We'd paid down assets. We'd paid off our home. We'd bought like properties, we bought shares, superannuation. So we were financially going quite well before the sale, but the sale was a big number, right? I remember when it came through, when the first thing comes through, and I started crying. Like the first offer, I was like, wow, like I was very reasonable in terms of what I was expecting to, because I wanted to be done with it there. So it wasn't night and day of like, it wasn't, but at the same time, like, yeah, it means you can, wipe out your debt. It means that you then are in a pretty decent position to get on with life. Basically, that financial box is more or less ticked. Yeah.
We'll pause at that point and say congratulations on building an amazing business and doing a great successful transaction. I love how you went about doing it, because often, and me included, most of our guests, will hire bankers or whatever, but I love the idea that you knew who the potential buyers were, and you were, dare I say, entrepreneurial enough to pick up. And so, another observation about you is like, yes, you're a dentist, but like, you love business, you're interested in 100%. Finance, you've got these, you are clearly a good marketing person. That's difficult for me to say, because I think I'm a good marketing person, but like, it is funny, you have these like, you're clearly good at ops and tech and all this type of stuff to be able to build a polished practice as well. So you've almost turned into this holistic business person that loves business, which is awesome, man. So like, congratulations on that. And then, okay, so you sold the business, big chunk of change. And I want to go back to something you said earlier on. You said hard, meaningful, interesting problems, right? That's what you said earlier on. Okay, so you sell your practice. Tell me what hard, meaningful, interesting problems you're doing now.
It's a really good question, right? And that's the thing, like that's those 3 words. It sat on my windowsill at work, and my wife did a collage of it. So hard, interesting, meaningful. So at the moment, I'm 6 months removed from the practice, and I don't have a next thing. So I'm a big believer, hard, interesting, meaningful, or another way is, you've got to fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve, right? You've got to fall in love with it deeply. And I was deeply in love with the problem I was trying to solve until I wasn't. But now, I'd read a lot about the problems of it, like people relatively young who sell out and loss of identity post-sale. I haven't found that, loss of social network, haven't found that. And also a lot of people jump straight back into something. I haven't found that urge at all. There's 3 things. I read something really interesting the other day. It people talk about, what would you do for free? What would you do for free? You flip that even further, and it said, what work would you pay money to do? And I was like, wow, that's a cool question. Like, what would you pay to do? So I think for me, there's 3 things that come up that I'm fairly sure I'd just about pay money to do. So I'm not a clinical dentist anymore, but surgical extractions was my genius zone. I couldn't see the art of fillings and all those sorts of things, but taking teeth out, that was something I love doing. I'm really good at it and I enjoy doing it. It just spins. It's like my meditation, right? So that's one. Do I go back and do that? I really like to write. So I've been posting a fair bit on LinkedIn, just different observations on business and things. I used to, before I did dentistry, when I started my career in dentistry, I wasn't sure it was for me. So I started writing articles for magazines and things. So I enjoy writing. And the final one is politics. Like part of me, my friends, I bug them because like I've always got thoughts and ideas. And part of me, I'd love to be premier, to be honest. Like I'd love to just, and not even that. It's not the ego thing. Like if I'm not that, I want to have influence, right? And I want to do stuff. And I think, and it's not out of like, I'm a big guy. I get more than enough attention just being me, right? So it's not about trying to put my name up on a thing. It's just like, I want to do something and you've got ideas and convictions and you want to see it, the rubber hit the road. So yep, like if I'm not the person whose name's up in lights, I don't care, but I want to have the influence to be able to do that. That's the thing. I want to drive that home. So I think for me, it's tooth extractions, writing, and politics. So the only 3 things I can think of for the hard, interesting, meaningful. I'm writing on LinkedIn a fair bit, which is good fun. I've set myself to do 50 articles in a year, but nothing has grabbed me to a point, again, like it's like writing a book, which I know you've done and I haven't, but I heard someone say, if you're not sure whether you should write a book, then you shouldn't. You've just got to be convinced that like, unless you can't see a future without you writing a book, don't write it. Don't start it because you're not going to do it. So I think it's the same thing for me. At some point, something will cross my desk and I'll just go, this is it. This is the next 10 years of my life. Here we go. But nothing has done that yet. It's that whole exploring versus exploiting.
Yeah, the right? I mean, I call it kind of the exploration or reinvention phase which you're in. And I love the fact that you've recognized like a handful of areas that you're already, and certainly with everything I've read it, and this is how I ended up doing this podcast is I read everything about this. I'm looking, there's a book that I only got here with me, but I don't know where it is. We've had John Rood, who's the author of the book, which I'll send you afterwards. It's a fantastic book about
I'd love to hear it.
What happens after exit to people, like, and some people deal very easily with it and some people don't.
Yep.
And but a lot of it is, kind of soul searching, and what is it that makes me get out of bed, and what is it that I kind of love. And the book thing's really interesting that you mentioned, like a lot of founders at exit want to pay it forward and write a book. And it's interesting why you're writing blogs. And I'm like, I always say to people, write lots of blogs. If you can write a blog, you've got a good foundation for two. Like, one, you can be bothered to write, big part of writing a book. And two, like, do people care enough about it? It's actually one of the reasons I ended up writing a book. Is I used to write blogs all the time, and like increasingly people used to like the content, and then eventually people started reaching out saying like, hey, like, how did you do this? And it's a bit like, I look at someone like you and be like, you could probably easily write a book on scaling a dental practice. I mean, it might not be what you want to do, but actually there are dental practices all over the world that owners who would be like, and I'm sure there are books like that, but like, man, this guy, how the heck did he do that? And they would be genuinely interested in that. So I think you're on the right track. I love the politics thing as well. Like, it's so interesting, and you clearly are good at anything. You said you called yourself intense earlier on, but you also strike me as like a nice guy, which again, in politics, like you have to be intense, but you also have to be like a good people person to be successful as well, which is cool. And one thing I was going to ask you about was, like, have you given yourself a timeline for this in your mind? Is it like hey, by the end of this year, by 2026, I need to have figured out what I want to do next? Or actually, are you in a phase where you're a little bit like, what, I love what you said, like, what are you going to, I wrote it down before, like, you're falling in love with another problem, which I think is fantastic. Yeah. You're just going to wait till you fall in love, so to speak.
100% the second. So I always knew I needed some time off, and we've kind of like, it does feel like we talked about it a bit off air beforehand, but there is this, it's hard to, it's easy to start a business. It's hard to scale a business, and it's harder again to sell it. And at the end of it there, you're in a smaller and smaller subset of people. And there is definitely some trauma there that I'm still figuring out, right? Like trying to work through. And I haven't quite made sense of that. But in terms of I haven't set myself up. I quite like my life as it is, to be honest. Like, everyone says, I can't wait to see what you do next. And it's like, I'm exhausted. It took a lot out of me, So I'm in zero rush to, I don't feel, I'm directionless, but not lost. Right. So I don't feel lost, but I feel, there's no central thrust to my next direction, but I don't feel lost. I don't sit there going, oh, woe is me. Oh, everyone doesn't look at me the same way. Like, I feel good about myself. I've got a lovely life, but I don't feel, it's a really good question. I don't have a sense of giving myself a deadline, right? I'm just very much taking it as it comes, enjoying life. I feel the nature of my personality, right? When I bought the practice that I bought, I had a coffee with a guy and I said, oh, do you know any practice for sale? He said, oh, there's one on, I literally drove straight there and knocked on the door. So when it happens, it'll happen, right? It'll happen. I'm not 100%. So, but there's nothing there which has gripped me where I've fallen in love with that problem, where I'm like, I can't see a world in which I'm not obsessed with doing this. So I think until that time comes, I don't want to force it. I don't want to try and, push myself into doing something that I don't really want to do because I feel like I should.
Well, we've also, we've heard it on the podcast where people have, you mentioned before, and there is an ego when you sell a business, right? Which is 100%. Like, I need to prove, I need to do it again. I need to prove it again to prove the first time wasn't a fluke, right? Not in everyone, but I've seen it in some people. Yeah. We had a guest on who talked about, he bought a business and it went terribly wrong. And it wasn't aligned. He kind of didn't follow his own rules, and it kind of, whether it was ego, whether it was his bank account, whatever, it didn't work out, and he was very open about it, which I thought was fascinating. But there is this, and I've been, in that question, when you write a book as well, it says, when you write a book, when's the next one coming out?
Totally.
Dude, it was so hard to write this book. And I did this before we had ChatGPT and any of this stuff. I had to literally every word. And so for me, I think taking your time and exploring different avenues, taking your time to, to fall in love again, I think is really smart. I have to say, and, whether you do mentoring or coaching or another business or startups or investing or property, politics, whatever it is, like, I think you're doing it. I think there's a lot to learn from post-exit founders that are listening to this, like your approach to just take your time and be at ease with your life. Like, slowing down is often very hard for people, which is like, I bet you the rhythm of your day is so different now in the case.
100%.
Like, you probably take your daughter, you mentioned, I don't know if you've got more kids, but you mentioned your daughter before, like taking your kids to school, and like, you probably never had that privilege, a year and a half ago or whatever.
100%, bro. Like, it's exactly right. And I think that all those things are true. I also think, like, in music, they talk about second album blues, of like the first album's a hit and then there's all that pressure on the second one and it stinks, right? And it's like, I think it's the same thing in business. It's like, oh, your first one was a hit. But it's funny. A lot of those things, like, and we'll just scoot through, but I don't have a strong desire to coach. Like, it's funny because people go, oh, I don't want to do it again. So I don't want to go buy a small practice, build it up. I've climbed that Everest. I've done it. I don't really have a strong desire to coach. I'd rather mentor the people I like for free than, go into coaching and have Filosi business coaching. It just doesn't, again, it's not an interesting problem for me to kind of solve. Like, I'm not in love with that idea of helping people do that. So I think whatever I do next will probably be very different. I don't feel like, it's funny, right? And I hear what you're saying, and I have heard that about, oh, you've got to, you feel you could improve it. I must say, I don't find that. I didn't find my identity. And in dentistry too, right? Like, a lot of dentists, elderly dentists who retire, they go from being doctor and everyone asking their opinion to being just another, there's a term, I'm not sure in Canada, but grey nomad, like grey-haired nomad caravanning around Australia. No one cares who they are, and they really struggle with that. Whereas I haven't found my sense of identity at all has been lost, or people look at me different. I'm very comfortable in my own skin. I'm not to say, I'm not still working through figuring a few things out, but I don't feel a sense of now I need to reload and prove a second time. I've done it. I'm happy.
Good for you. Because not everyone feels like that. And I think that's amazing that you've got that insight. And there's a phrase that comes to, there's a quote, and it's like, you move from success to significance, right? Is this like, you called it an Everest, you have this Everest, and then it moves to like, okay, like you talk about the politics, like, that's probably less about success, and it's more about significance, more about, and there's a book called Strength to Strength, which is quite a famous book, which the guy talks about, like, you have this first phase and then the second phase of your life. And that second phase is probably where similar age, I'm guessing to myself, is all about kind of like doing more and adding more value to society, to friends, to community. It's like wisdom based.
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting, right? I don't have a strong service base. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, I don't want to save tree frogs in the Amazon, or like, I don't feel a strong compulsion to go out and save the world. But the things I'm passionate about, I'm very passionate about, right? And I think that I've always kind of been fascinated with people who are enormously successful across multiple disciplines. Like James Dyson, as an engineer and inventor, amazing. As a business person, amazing. As a marketer, like, these sorts of people, I find, like, they're my idols, right? The people who they've exceeded at very disparate areas as opposed to just being good at exceptional at one thing. So I don't quite know what the future holds, but I dare say it won't be buying another dental practice and scaling that. It'll be something different. It might not even be in business, but I think there's lots of areas of life out there that are worth having a crack at. We'll see. Well,
look, I'm a fan, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what your next chapter is, as per the name of the podcast. And hey, well, look, what an absolute pleasure to hang out with you today. And I appreciate you getting up so early with your cup of coffee. You've got it's family day ahead. You've got your day ahead. But I've really enjoyed meeting you today and spending some time with you, hearing about your story. Amazing. Like, I think you've pulled off something that many people will find astonishing, in the sense that you were able to extract yourself from a business that is historically very wrapped around the individual, and then being able to sell it as well. So huge congratulations, man. And thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me. I've loved it just as much. So really appreciate it. Thank you.